Welcome to the Today Show with Kathie Lee and Hoda. Today we have a feature for you on standard deviation, and you're going to want to stick around for this because we're going to tell you the 3 most important things you should know about it. Next time your next door neighbor, statistician friend comes over for a backyard barbecue, you'll be able to tell them exactly what you know, and then you'll be able to keep up with them when they start talking about those new trends in statistics. So first thing you'll want to know is what is standard deviation to begin with. And so standard deviation is a measurement, and this measurement is used to find out the standard typical distance of the data from its mean or average. Your statistician friend will probably like this measurement because it is reliable and unaffected by sample size. So watch out though, because it can be affected by outliers. Hoda, do you have anything to add?
Hey there, Kathie Lee. Well, another way you could think about standard deviation is what it says about the data. Another important thing to remember about standard deviation is that it illustrates the spread of the data. Therefore, the more the data is clustered around the mean, the smaller the standard deviation is going to be. However, remember that the smallest a standard deviation can be is 0. This specific standard deviation occurs when all of the data is clustered around that specific mean. However, the standard deviation can have a larger value. This value is normally obtained when a data has a larger spread. To better help illustrate these concepts, we have an example of data with a standard deviation of 0. As you can see, all of the data is concentrated at a mean of 4. However, as you can see here, as the data spreads out more, the standard deviation increases. Here, the mean of this data is 3.5 with a standard deviation of 2.5. Knowing that standard deviation illustrates the spread of data is very helpful when interpreting data. For example, a poll asking how many speeding tickets have you gotten has a mean of 0.37 speeding tickets, and the numbers of the speeding tickets range from 0 to 10. With just this information, it may be a little difficult to interpret the data. However, knowing that the data has a standard deviation of 0.901 helps illustrate typically how far the data deviates from the mean. You can also interpret the standard deviation as meaning that the data is pretty clustered around the mean and has a smaller spread.
Thanks, Hoda. And now I'm going to tell you about the third and final most important thing you should know about standard deviation. And that is how to calculate it. So, when you're calculating the standard deviation, first you calculate each score's deviation from the mean. So, the score minus the mean. You'll have a set of individual deviations plus or minus a number is what it will look like. So, when you have that list of scores, you square each of those deviations and add them all together after you're done squaring them. And you get a number called the sum of squares. You're halfway there with the sum of squares. So, this number needs to be divided by the number of scores minus 1, or n minus 1. And then you take the square root of this number to get the standard deviation. So, if you really want to impress your friends, you should know why you use n minus 1 when calculating sample standard deviation. Subtracting 1 from the number of scores corrects for the bias in your sample's variation. That bias in the variation is there because one of those numbers in your sample is not free to vary when you calculate the mean of your sample. This means that you could select whatever numbers you like for each of the scores, but when you get to the final one, you're only going to have a certain option in order to get the same mean. So, this makes the standard deviation what we call an unbiased estimate of the standard deviation when we use n minus 1, and it accounts for that bias. Thank you so much for sticking around today and hearing about standard deviation. We hope it helps you out